There is a quiet decision taking shape inside your soulmate, and they may not have shared it with anyone because even they are still processing how deeply it has changed them. For a long time, they tried to control what they felt for you. Whenever emotions became too strong, they found a reason to step back. Whenever memories returned, they tried to distract themselves. Whenever their heart became honest for a brief moment, their mind quickly found another explanation. But something has shifted recently. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that avoiding a feeling does not make that feeling disappear. It only makes it wait beneath the surface. And listen carefully, because this realization may have come after a very ordinary moment. They could have been alone, going through their day, when suddenly a memory of you appeared without warning. Perhaps it was something small, a familiar place, a conversation they still remember, or simply the way your presence once made them feel. Instead of immediately pushing the thought away, they allowed themselves to sit with it. And for perhaps the first time, they asked themselves a different question. Why am I still trying so hard not to feel this? That question has been following them. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that their heart has been speaking quietly for a long time. They may have ignored it, because listening would require them to admit things they were not ready to face. They might have to acknowledge that you mattered more than they wanted to admit, that certain feelings never completely disappeared, and that some decisions were influenced by fear rather than genuine emotional clarity, because your heart needs this right now. They are becoming tired of pretending that their emotions are insignificant. They are not necessarily ready to reveal everything yet, but internally they are becoming more honest. They are starting to believe that their feelings deserve to be understood rather than immediately rejected, and this is only the beginning. Because once your soulmate recognizes how often they have ignored what their heart was telling them, they are going to discover something even deeper about why those feelings kept returning to you. Your soulmate is beginning to understand something they once refused to accept. Ignoring their feelings never actually made those feelings disappear. For a long time, they may have believed that distance would eventually create emotional clarity. They thought that if they stopped thinking about you, stayed busy, focused on other responsibilities, or simply allowed enough time to pass, whatever they felt would naturally fade away. At first, they may even have believed it was working. There were days when you did not cross their mind as strongly. There were moments when life seemed to move forward normally. But then, without warning, something would bring the connection back into their awareness. A familiar song, a certain place, an old conversation, a quiet evening, or even a completely unrelated moment could suddenly remind them of you. And each time it happened, they found themselves asking why the feeling was still there. Because your heart needs this right now, your soulmate is starting to recognize a pattern that they could not see before. The more they tried to suppress their emotions, the more intensely those emotions seemed to return during quiet moments. They could distract themselves during the day, but when everything became still, their own thoughts became harder to escape. That is when memories of you may have appeared most clearly. They may have remembered the way you spoke to them, the way certain conversations felt, or the emotional comfort they experienced around you. They may have remembered things they once considered insignificant and suddenly realized that those moments had stayed with them for a reason. And listen carefully, because this realization is not simply about missing someone. Your soulmate is beginning to question why they repeatedly tried to convince themselves that what they felt was unimportant. Perhaps they told themselves that the timing was wrong. Perhaps they believed circumstances made the connection impossible. Perhaps they listened to other people's opinions or allowed their own fears to become louder than their emotions. Maybe they thought walking away was the mature thing to do because it seemed safer than confronting feelings they did not fully understand. But now they are beginning to realize that avoiding an emotional truth is not the same as resolving it. There is a difference between moving forward and running away. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that difference. Moving forward means accepting what happened, learning from it, and allowing yourself to grow. Running away means constantly finding ways to avoid feeling what is still unresolved. For a long time, they may have confused the two. They thought that because they were continuing with their life, they had successfully moved beyond the connection. But now they are realizing that their heart never completely closed that chapter. Something remained unfinished within them, not necessarily because they were destined to return, but because they never honestly acknowledged what the connection meant. That realization can be surprisingly emotional. They may feel regret about the moments when they ignored their own intuition. They may think about opportunities they did not take, conversations they avoided, or feelings they refused to express. They may wonder how different things could have been if they had simply been honest with themselves earlier. These thoughts can bring sadness, but they can also bring clarity. Your soulmate is finally beginning to see that their emotions were not something they needed to fear, and this is where their internal relationship with their feelings starts changing. Before, a thought about you may have triggered resistance. Now it may create curiosity. Before, they may have immediately asked themselves how to stop thinking about you. Now they may ask what the thought is trying to tell them. Before, they may have judged themselves for caring. Now they are becoming more compassionate toward their own emotions. That is a major transformation. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that having feelings does not make them weak. It does not mean they have lost control. It does not mean they have to immediately make a dramatic decision. It simply means something inside them deserves to be understood, because your heart needs this right now. They may be spending more time reflecting on the emotional difference between what they truly felt and what they told themselves they should feel. Those two things may not have always matched. Their mind may have said, "Let this go," while their heart quietly said, "There is still something here." Their circumstances may have encouraged distance, while their emotions continued asking for honesty. For perhaps the first time, they are beginning to listen to that quieter voice. They may also be recognizing how much fear influenced their previous choices. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of being misunderstood, fear that opening their heart would lead to disappointment, fear that the connection could become more complicated than they were prepared to handle. These fears may have been understandable, but your soulmate is now asking whether allowing fear to make every decision truly protected them, or did it simply prevent them from discovering what might have been possible? That question can be difficult to face, but it can also be freeing. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that they do not have to know the final outcome before they can acknowledge what they feel. They can admit that you still matter without immediately knowing what comes next. They can accept that the connection affected them without creating unrealistic expectations. They can recognize their emotions while still respecting reality, timing, and your own choices. This balance is important because their new awareness is not about losing themselves in emotion. It's about becoming honest enough to stop denying it. And slowly, something inside them is becoming calmer. They no longer feel the same need to fight every memory. They no longer feel compelled to immediately replace every thought of you with a distraction. They are allowing themselves to remember without turning every memory into a painful question. They are beginning to appreciate what the connection taught them rather than only focusing on how it ended or where it currently stands. Perhaps they are realizing that some people leave an emotional imprint that cannot be measured by the amount of time spent together. Sometimes a connection changes the way you understand love, trust, vulnerability, or yourself. Even if circumstances become complicated, the lesson remains. Your soulmate may now be recognizing that you became part of one of those lessons, and that is why their feelings kept returning. Not because they were incapable of moving forward, but because something within them had never been fully acknowledged. Now they are acknowledging it. They are admitting to themselves that they cared. They are admitting that certain memories still matter. They are admitting that the connection affected them more deeply than they once wanted to accept. And once a person becomes honest with themselves at this level, something changes permanently. They may still move carefully, they may still have doubts, they may still wonder what you feel, but they are no longer willing to pretend that their own heart has nothing to say. And that is exactly where the silent commitment begins to form, because after spending so much time ignoring their emotions, your soulmate is reaching a point where they no longer want to repeat the same pattern. They are beginning to understand that the next time their heart speaks about you, they want to listen before fear interrupts. They may not know yet what they will do with that truth, but they are finally ready to hear it. Something inside your soulmate has reached a point where silence no longer feels like the safest answer. After spending so much time questioning their feelings, pushing them aside, and convincing themselves that they needed to move forward without looking back, they are now beginning to make a quiet promise to themselves. It is not a promise they announce to anyone. It is not something they necessarily wrote down or spoke aloud. It is something much more personal. Deep inside, they have decided that they will no longer automatically ignore what their heart feels for you. And this decision may have come after realizing just how exhausting it became to constantly fight emotions that never truly disappeared. Because your heart needs this right now. Understand that this commitment does not necessarily mean your soulmate is suddenly preparing for some dramatic confession or immediate reunion. The change begins much deeper than that. It begins with honesty. They are telling themselves that if they miss you, they will admit that they miss you. If a memory makes them emotional, they will not immediately push it away. If they still care, they will stop pretending that caring is something they need to be ashamed of. And if thoughts of you continue returning, they will allow themselves to ask why, instead of automatically searching for ways to silence them. This may seem simple, but for your soulmate it is a major emotional breakthrough. For a long time, they may have believed that controlling their feelings meant becoming stronger. They thought strength meant staying detached, appearing unaffected, and never allowing another person to have too much emotional influence over them. But now, they are beginning to understand that true strength can also mean having the courage to acknowledge what is happening inside you. And listen carefully, because this is where their perspective begins to mature. Your soulmate is learning that feelings do not always need an immediate solution. Sometimes they simply need to be understood. They do not have to decide today what the future of this connection will look like. They do not have to force a reunion or completely close the door. They can simply accept the truth of what they feel and allow time to reveal what those emotions mean. That realization may be bringing them an unexpected sense of peace. Instead of fighting themselves, every time you come to mind, they can finally breathe. Instead of asking, "Why am I still feeling this?" they can ask, "What is this feeling showing me?" Instead of assuming that emotional attachment means they are stuck, they can recognize that some feelings are part of personal growth. Your soulmate may now be reflecting on how many times their heart tried to get their attention. Perhaps they remembered you during moments when they least expected it. Perhaps they felt emotionally connected to a memory long after they believed they had moved on. Perhaps certain experiences with other people made them realize what had been unique about the connection they shared with you. These moments may have gradually convinced them that ignoring their feelings was not giving them the clarity they wanted. It was only creating more questions. So now they are choosing something different. They are choosing to listen because your heart needs this right now. Your soulmate is also beginning to separate genuine emotion from fear. They are asking themselves whether they truly wanted distance or whether they simply believed distance would protect them. They are questioning whether they genuinely stopped caring or whether they became better at hiding what they cared about. They are looking at old decisions with more honesty, and some of those decisions may look very different from this new perspective. There may be regret, but there is also maturity. They are beginning to understand that they cannot change what happened, but they can change how they respond to what they understand now. They can stop repeating the same pattern of avoidance. They can become more emotionally honest. They can give themselves permission to acknowledge that you still hold a meaningful place in their emotional world. And perhaps the most important part of this silent commitment is that they are no longer making promises. Based on fear, they are not promising themselves that they will chase you regardless of circumstances. They are not promising that everything will magically work out. They are promising something much more grounded. They will not lie to themselves anymore. If their heart tells them something matters, they will listen. If they feel the need for clarity, they will seek it instead of creating assumptions. If they have something meaningful to say, they will consider expressing it rather than allowing fear to silence them. This internal decision may also change the way they behave around the idea of you. They may become more reflective. They may pay greater attention to opportunities for communication. They may stop avoiding certain conversations simply because they are emotionally uncomfortable. They may begin considering what honesty would actually look like if the two of you crossed paths again. And even if no immediate action happens, the internal shift remains significant. Your soulmate is no longer fighting their own heart in the same way. They are becoming willing to coexist with their emotions instead of treating them like an enemy. This is where their silent commitment becomes powerful. It is not about forcing a particular outcome. It is about refusing to ignore their emotional truth simply because it feels inconvenient, uncertain, or frightening. They have learned what happens when they suppress everything. Now they want to discover what happens when they finally listen. And as they begin doing that, another realization starts forming. If they are going to honor what they feel, they may eventually have to become honest not only with themselves, but with you as well. That possibility may still make them nervous. They may wonder how you would respond. They may worry about whether too much time has passed or whether circumstances have changed. But those questions no longer make them want to run. Instead, they are making them think. They are making them prepare. They are making them emotionally braver. Your soulmate may not yet know what their next step will be, but they have already taken the first one. They stopped telling themselves that their feelings were meaningless. They stopped treating their heart like something that needed to be silenced. And somewhere inside, they have made a quiet commitment. Whatever happens next, they will listen to what their heart is trying to tell them instead of automatically turning away. That decision may seem invisible from the outside, but inside your soulmate, it is changing everything. Now that your soulmate has made that quiet commitment within themselves, something even deeper is beginning to happen. They are no longer simply acknowledging that they have feelings for you. They are beginning to understand why they spent so much time fighting those feelings in the first place. And this realization is bringing them face to face with something they cannot easily avoid anymore. Much of their resistance was connected to fear. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of making the wrong choice. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of discovering that the connection mattered more than they were prepared to admit. For a long time, those fears may have sounded like logic in their mind. But now your soulmate is beginning to recognize the difference between genuine wisdom and emotional avoidance. Because your heart needs this right now. They are asking themselves questions they once avoided completely. Did I really stop caring, or did I simply become afraid of caring? Did I truly want distance, or did I believe distance would protect me? Was I following my intuition, or was I listening to fear because fear felt safer? These questions may be uncomfortable, but they are also creating a new kind of clarity. Your soulmate is no longer trying to defend every decision they made in the past. They are trying to understand themselves honestly and listen carefully, because this is where their emotional transformation becomes visible from within. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that fear can be very convincing. It can make someone believe they are being practical when they are actually avoiding vulnerability. It can make silence feel like strength. It can make walking away feel easier than having an honest conversation. But now they are recognizing that protecting their heart from every possible disappointment also prevents them from experiencing genuine emotional connection. That understanding is changing them. They may still have fears, but those fears are no longer automatically controlling their choices. Instead of immediately retreating whenever emotions become intense, they are learning to pause. Instead of assuming the worst, they are learning to question their assumptions. Instead of allowing uncertainty to become a reason for avoidance, they are becoming more comfortable admitting, "I don't know what happens next, but I know what I feel right now." That is emotional courage. Your soulmate may also be recognizing that if another opportunity with you ever appears, they cannot approach it with the same version of themselves that existed before. They would need to communicate differently. They would need to be more transparent. They would need to stop expecting you to understand feelings they never expressed. And they would need to recognize that vulnerability is not weakness. Because your heart needs this right now, they may be imagining what it would feel like to finally have an honest conversation with you. Perhaps they wonder what they would say. Perhaps they replay things they wish they had explained differently. Perhaps they think about the questions they would ask you. These thoughts may create nervousness, but they also create something that was missing before: willingness. They are becoming willing to face the truth. If they discover that you still feel something, they want to understand it. If they discover that you have moved forward, they may have to accept that too. But either way, they are beginning to understand that uncertainty is better than living indefinitely with questions they never had the courage to confront. This is why their silent commitment is becoming stronger. They are no longer promising themselves that they will get a particular outcome. They are promising themselves that they will not abandon their own emotional truth simply because the outcome is unknown, and that distinction matters. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that following their heart does not mean ignoring reality. It means allowing their emotions to be part of the decision instead of completely excluding them. They can think logically and still acknowledge what they feel. They can respect circumstances while still being honest about their desires. They can move carefully without pretending they feel nothing. This balance is something they may not have understood before. And now, as they develop this new perspective, they may begin noticing how peaceful honesty can feel. There is less internal conflict, less pretending, less pressure to convince themselves that they are unaffected. They can finally admit that you mattered, that the connection changed them, and that certain feelings remain. Perhaps this is why your soulmate seems quieter lately. Their silence may not necessarily mean emotional distance. It may simply mean they are processing something deeply personal. They are reorganizing their understanding of the past and deciding how they want to approach the future. And somewhere within that reflection, one thought keeps becoming stronger. I do not want to ignore this again. That thought may not immediately become an action, but it is creating a foundation for one. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that if life gives them another genuine opportunity to communicate with you, they want to approach it differently. They do not want pride to speak first. They do not want fear to decide for them. They do not want old misunderstandings to control a conversation that has not even happened yet. They want honesty. They want clarity. They want to understand what is real. And perhaps most importantly, they want to give themselves permission to experience whatever truth emerges from that honesty, because your heart needs this right now. This is not simply about your soulmate becoming more emotionally attached. It is about becoming more emotionally responsible. They are learning that feelings deserve attention, but they also deserve maturity. If they truly care about you, they must be willing to approach the connection with respect rather than impulse. That realization may be one of the strongest signs that their internal transformation is genuine. They are not simply romanticizing the past. They are learning from it. They are not simply wishing for you. They are thinking about how they would treat the connection differently. They are not simply remembering what they felt. They are finally understanding why those feelings mattered, and this is bringing them closer to the final realization of this journey. Perhaps their heart was never asking them to chase you blindly. Perhaps it was asking them to stop running away from themselves. Now they are finally listening, and once someone becomes brave enough to listen to their own heart without allowing fear to control the conversation, the next step becomes much easier to recognize. The path forward may still be uncertain, but your soulmate is no longer standing at the same emotional place where they once stood. They have changed, their understanding has changed, and their willingness to honor what they feel has changed. The question now is no longer whether they will continue ignoring their heart. Deep inside, they have already decided they will not. And now, your soulmate is reaching the deepest point of this entire emotional journey, because the decision they made quietly within themselves is beginning to change the way they see everything that comes next. For so long, they believed that ignoring their feelings was the safest way to protect themselves. They thought that if they stayed silent, avoided difficult conversations, and kept their emotions under control, eventually the connection would become easier to forget. But now they understand something very different. Silence may have protected them from temporary discomfort, but it never gave them the honesty their heart was asking for. And after everything they have experienced, they are no longer willing to keep living between what they feel and what they pretend to feel, because your heart needs this right now. Your soulmate is not necessarily making a promise about exactly what the future will look like. Their commitment is more personal than that. They are promising themselves that they will listen when their heart speaks. If they still care about you, they will admit it to themselves. If they miss you, they will not immediately judge themselves for it. If they feel drawn toward understanding this connection, they will allow themselves to explore that feeling instead of shutting it down because uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. This is a completely different emotional position from where they were before. Your soulmate is learning that acknowledging a feeling does not mean they have to act impulsively. They can feel deeply and still move carefully. They can care about you while respecting your life, your choices, and your boundaries. They can wonder about the future without forcing the future to happen. And perhaps this is the maturity they were missing before. Listen carefully, because there is something beautiful about this realization. Your soulmate is no longer trying to decide whether their feelings are convenient. They are beginning to ask whether their feelings are honest. That distinction changes everything. Convenience once allowed them to walk away. Fear once gave them reasons to remain silent. Circumstances once became explanations for why they should not look too deeply at what was happening inside them. But now they are looking beneath all of those explanations and seeing what remains. And what remains is you. The memories, the emotional impact, the unanswered questions, the feeling that something about this connection still matters. Perhaps they do not know exactly what that means yet, but they are finally willing to acknowledge that it means something. Your soulmate may also be thinking differently about what a future interaction with you could look like. Instead of imagining a dramatic moment where everything is suddenly solved, they may be imagining something much more genuine. A simple conversation, an honest message, an opportunity to clear the air, a moment where both people can finally speak without carrying the assumptions and fears that shape the past. And if that opportunity ever comes, your soulmate wants to be ready. They do not want to hide behind pride. They do not want to pretend they are unaffected. They do not want to allow fear to make the decision before they even understand what is possible. They want to listen. They want to speak honestly. They want to understand, because your heart needs this right now. This may be the real meaning behind their silent commitment. They are not promising that everything will automatically work out. They are promising that they will no longer betray their own emotional truth simply because the future is uncertain. That is a powerful promise, and perhaps the most important part is that this commitment is beginning to bring them peace. The internal battle is becoming quieter. They no longer have to spend so much energy convincing themselves that they do not care. They can acknowledge what they feel without immediately turning it into fear. They can remember you without feeling that they have somehow failed to move forward. They are realizing that healing does not always mean forgetting. Sometimes healing means remembering without pain. Sometimes healing means accepting what someone meant to you without allowing the past to control your future. And sometimes healing means finally admitting that a feeling was real. Even if you were not ready to understand it when it first appeared, your soulmate is moving toward that kind of acceptance now. They may still have moments of doubt. They may still question whether reaching out would be wise. They may still wonder how you feel or whether too much time has passed. But those questions are no longer erasing the emotional truth underneath them. Instead, they are becoming part of a more mature process. Your soulmate is learning to hold both hope and reality at the same time. They can hope for a meaningful conversation without assuming it must happen. They can care about you without trying to control your choices. They can recognize their feelings without demanding a particular outcome. And that is what makes their transformation so significant, because your heart needs this right now. Remember that the most powerful changes often happen quietly. You may not immediately see what is happening inside another person's heart. You may not receive instant confirmation. You may not know what conversations are taking place in their mind. But internally, your soulmate may be reaching a point where denial no longer feels possible. They know what they feel, and now they are choosing not to ignore it. Whatever happens from here must still unfold through real choices, honest communication, and mutual willingness. But something important has already changed. Your soulmate has stopped treating their heart as an inconvenience. They are beginning to treat it as a source of information about what matters to them, and perhaps this is the final realization they were always meant to reach. Their heart was never asking them to abandon reason. It was asking them to stop pretending that you did not matter, to stop pretending that certain memories had no meaning, to stop pretending that walking away automatically erased what they felt. And now they are finally honest enough to admit that some feelings cannot be silenced simply because they are inconvenient. They can only be understood. So as this chapter continues, your soulmate may become more willing to follow that understanding wherever it leads. Maybe it leads toward communication. Maybe it leads toward closure. Maybe it leads toward a renewed connection. The future belongs to the choices both of you make. But one thing has already changed within them. They are no longer running from their own heart. They have made a silent commitment that the next time it speaks about you, they will listen. And this time, they will not immediately turn away.